Hi, everybody. It's me, the Fetch, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there is Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Aloha, everyone. I'm getting some interference on this end. I hope it's okay. Aloha, everyone. Welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson. And today we have a very special episode of the Sacred Matrix with Dr. Michael E. Salla. And before we bring him on, let me tell you a little bit about him. Dr. Salla is a pioneer in the development of exopolitics, the political study of the key actors, institutions, and processes associated with extraterrestrial life. His interest in exopolitics evolved out of his investigation of the sources of international conflict and its relationship to an extraterrestrial presence that is not acknowledged to the general public, elected officials, or even senior military officials. His groundbreaking Exopolitics, Political Implications of the Extraterrestrial Presence, published in 2004, was the first published book on exopolitics and explained the political implications of extraterrestrial life. His more recent, Exposing U.S. Government Policies on Extraterrestrial Life, from the Exopolitics Institute in 2009, takes exopolitics to a new level of sophistication by revealing how the world's most powerful nation secretly manages information concerning extraterrestrial life and technology. And Dr. Salla has been on hundreds of radio and television shows and presented at international conferences for his research on exopolitics and international conflict. We went to one of his conferences on the Big Island, I think it was 2006, where we met Dr. Salla, and it was excellent. Hope he does more. And today's show, we're going to discuss the secret space program, revelations by Corey Goode that Dr. Salla has been focusing on recently. Goode has described many issues such as solar system quarantine, Earth quarantine, solar Warden program, meetings with different ET factions, threat of artificial intelligence, full disclosure event, and we're going to talk about this and more. Dr. Lesson, what would you like to say before we bring on Dr. Salla?
I'm really excited to have Michael on the show. Basically, if we get disclosure, Michael is going to be one of the guys that does it because he says, skip the government. Ordinary people who give a damn can contact the extraterrestrials, and that's just what he's done and made possible. And now that we're on the verge of disclosure, we're starting to find out, especially from these interviews that Michael's going to be talking about slave laborers. Any of you watch, it's like the Pajorans slaving for the Cardassians. That's how Earthlings are being treated on some of these posts. Well, I'll let Michael tell you all about it.
Welcome, Michael. Thank you for coming to our show today.
Aloha, Janet and Sasha. Yes, I'm very excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to this show. And I just want to actually mention that there actually was a very big development in Greece And Greece, as you know, is the foundation for Western democracy. And I think that the Greek vote actually has a very important implication for the secret space programs that the Europeans are involved in.
So how does that affect this? Could you elaborate a little bit?
Of course, yes. Well, basically, in order to conduct these secret space programs, every major nation that is involved has a black budget. And this is a form of revenue that is done off the books, so that way the parliaments and the media and the general population don't know how this money is being generated and how it's being siphoned off to these secret space programs or to these classified programs. Now, one of the things that Corey Goode has revealed in his revelations, and I'm glad you mentioned him at the start, that he actually has really put out some dynamite information about what's going on out there, is that he says that one of the secret space programs actually operates outside of the solar system. It's a multinational NATO-type organization which has a lot of European countries represented in it. So it was kind of like a consolation prize, if you will, because the Americans ran the Solar Warden program that was in charge of our solar system. And there were corporations that were doing a lot of the major trading in our solar system. So as a kind of consolation prize, the Europeans got to have this secret space program that would operate outside of our solar system in a kind of like Star Trek like model. Mm-hmm. And of course, this has to be funded. Now, how do you fund that? And it's funded by the European Central Bank and the major corporations and central banks from other major nations affiliated with the European Union. We're talking about the Bank of England, the Swiss Central Bank, and so forth. And basically, they implement a lot of these austerity policies whereby governments have strict limits on how much they can spend for the welfare policies of their nations. And if they go over those limits, then it's kind of like tough luck. You got to implement austerity. And the kind of austerity measures have gradually become tougher and tougher. And countries like Germany have kind of led the way in saying that every other European nation has to observe these very strict financial spending guidelines, the monetary policy, and cut back on spending if they go outside that or go beyond the limits. And so this vote that just happened today, Sunday in Europe.
Oh, wow.
It just literally was an example of a country, Greece, saying no to this policy.
Yay.
No to austerity. So the Greeks have said no. So they're the first major European nation to kind of like stand up and say no to the international banking system and say, no, we're not going to accept these austerities. And the thing is that these austerities were a cover for the European central banking system, along with the intelligence agencies of the European nation states, to fund their own secret space program. And because the Greeks said no, now they're going to be followed by the Portuguese, by the Italians, and others, where the people are going to be emboldened and say, no, we're not going to accept these austerity measures. And so this, I think, is going to lead to a real calamity in terms of the black funding of the European secret space program.
So are you saying, and I think, Sasha, you're breathing into the mic a little bit, be careful. Are you saying, Michael, that all these countries have their secret space programs? So how many people know about this? How do they keep this secret from the masses? Are we stupid or something? Or are they able to keep secrets out well? I don't understand. If it's so widespread that every country's involved, how is it possible they've kept it secret from the average person for all these hundreds if not thousands of years?
Right. Well, the American secret space program is pretty well known. I think the Americans follow the policy of hide the truth in plain sight. So you have the truth leaked out, but you do it through sources that aren't legitimate or who are very questionable in terms of reputation, or you do it through the major media and so forth. And that way, the truth is out there, but it's done in a way that people can kind of laugh it off. And so if you, for example, say that, well, there's a secret organization that monitors extraterrestrials living amongst us, people will say, well, just laugh at you and say, oh, you've been watching Men in Black too much. That's a clever way of hiding the truth in plain sight. The European space program, they've been basically doing this in their own unique way. This hasn't kind of come out very much at all, that the Europeans have their own secret space program. It really took someone like Corey Goode to come forward and say that, well, this is what exists and this is the European involvement. And so when you look at the data that Corey has released and you match it up with the existence of secret space programs, the kind of the way in which European central banks operate, especially major nations like Germany, which has a really big role in the way these secret space programs are run. Angela Merkel is really a pivotal figure in all of this. And I hope in future to be able to kind of reveal the names of some people who are going to finger Angela Merkel as being the key European person behind the European secret space program. But for now, it's enough to know that Germany is basically the one that's leading the pack in terms of maintaining these strict monetary policies in Europe. And it's well, as you maintain these strict monetary policies, what happens is that the European central banks get to decide how that money is spent. Who gets the money that the European central banks are able to print out? Because the European central banks, like the Federal Reserve in the United States, they get to dictate their monetary policy. They get to decide how much money they print out, how much money they put into the system. So if the European Central Bank is printing off or putting into the system, trillions of euros not used for the kind of benefit of the European public, but being siphoned off into this secret European space program, people aren't going to be wiser for it, because as far as the Europeans are concerned, they're trying to survive, with these increased austerities. Right. And I think that this is a very important thing to kind of keep in mind, that the Europeans have their own program that they fund through a black budget, and that things such as austerity policies that are imposed on more and more European nations, these are great covers for the European central banks and the intelligence services to raise the funds they need for their own secret space program.
What are they doing with these programs in the secret space programs? What are these programs doing?
Right. So let me just say before we answer that, you mentioned Corey Goode, and he's got information. Who is Corey Goode that he has this information? What's his story then? How did he come by this information?
Okay, well, Corey has a very interesting background. Firstly, from 1986 to 2007, he was recruited into and served in a secret space program called Salla, Warden. And after serving in that for a period of 6-7 years, then he was basically taken into another aspect of the programs to kind of monitor or to interrogate people or extraterrestrials that were involved in kind of very dangerous policies, such involving artificial intelligence. So he did that work for a total of 21 years, from 1986 to 2007. Then he says what happened was that he was age regressed and put back in time using the time travel technology that the secret space programs have to the time in 1986 when he was just 16 years of age, and basically taken off planet, so that he was age regressed and put back to only like maybe just shortly after, like in conventional time, it would have been like he would have maybe an hour or two he would have missed in conventional time. So he's put back into that time frame again, and he lived the next 21 years again. So it's like he's lived the same 21 years from 1986 to 2007 twice. And then, yes, which in itself is an amazing thing, and he has an incredible story to share about that. But what makes Corey's information so compelling now is that more recently in 2015, he was made the delegate to a series of secret space program meetings. He was made a delegate for a group of extraterrestrials that called themselves the Sphere Being Alliance. This is an association of 5 groups of extraterrestrials that have come into the planet over the last have come into our solar system over the last decade or so, and implemented a solar system-wide quarantine, and you can talk a little bit more about that later, and actually have basically frozen in place the different space programs that have been doing all sorts of things, some positive things like protecting the solar system from kind of more aggressive extraterrestrial civilizations from coming in, or those indulging in kind of trade with extraterrestrial civilizations from other solar systems, or those doing really terrible things like a human slave trade. All of these things have been going on. So this Sphere Being Alliance has kind of like put this quarantine in place and basically implemented a process or encouraged the secret space programs, especially the Solar Warden space program, to
We're getting some wind noises. Just a minute. I don't know if it's coming from your like Dr. Salla or Sasha's. Just be aware of that. Maybe cover your mic or mute when you're not talking, if you're creating the wind. Okay, so let me ask you a question, and then Sasha should ask a question. So you're saying that Corey went back. So they took him back to age 16 in his body. He was physically 16 again and relived it. Or how are they able to control how a person ages? Obviously, he had his intelligence, right? His intellect and his memories. They took that part back to his 1986, right? Is that what? Explain that a little bit more, because that's pretty much what they did at Montauk with Duncan Cameron and the other fellow that just died a couple of years ago.
Al Bielek, yes.
Al Bielek, yes.
Yes, they do have this age regression technology. From what I've been able to tell from different whistleblowers, it basically takes 2 or 3 weeks where they basically put you into a kind of semi-coma, or like you're kind of barely conscious, and it's a very time-consuming process over those 2 to 3 weeks, where the cells in your body are somehow regenerated, and you are basically age regressed to whatever age they want you regressed to. And so, in the case of Corey, in 2007. They age regressed him to 16 years of age. That they're able to do that through technology. So now it's 2007. He's been age regressed after he's done like 21 years serving in the secret space programs. He's been age regressed into a 16-year-old body, and now that body is shot back in time to like just an hour or something, some short period after the time he was initially taken back in 1986. So that means that in 1986, his parents are sleeping in the one room. Let's just say that at 1 a.m. Corey is.
Hello?
I think we lost him.
Uh-oh. Hold on, everybody. Let me get a hold of Sean and see if I can pull him back on.
in the meantime, what it sounds like is that this group is actually protecting us, that they are making sure that the programs to stop incoming debris and things like that from harming Earth are still in place. And our colleague, Bob Evans, has been actually showing us photographs from Solo, from our own NASA cameras, of how something has been sapping incoming debris. And now Dr. Salla's informant is telling us how this came about by this group that has put a freeze on the programs that protect Earth. As you know, from those of you, I'm just rapping until Michael gets back, but as you know, Marduk and his kin, the Anunnaki, have been controlling Earth through the Illuminati for some time now, and that Nanar, who's the king of Nibiru after Anu abdicated.
Hello, are you back?
I am, yes.
Oh, thank you. We got him. Okay. So you were saying in 1986, his body is sucked back through time, and then we lost you.
Okay, yes. So his body is shot back in time to 1986, and basically it's like in terms of time, as in his 1986, it's like it's only about an hour or whatever after the time he was initially taken. So even though in conventional terms he's missed, say, an hour, he's lived 21 years, and the memories of that 21 years in the secret space program, he still has those. Now, as far as Corey is concerned, he said that what happened in his case was that he was able to retain most of the memories. Because what typically happens for people who go through that kind of program and that age regression technology and then being shot back in time is that their memories are wiped. But in Corey's case, because he was an intuitive empath, that kind of empathic ability enabled him to basically keep that connection with his core identity. And so he kept a lot of those memories. They couldn't wipe them out through using the kind of chemicals and the kind of memory technologies that they use. So he kept a lot of those memories and just kind of kept quiet about it for years and years because it was not something that he felt he could disclose to others without them kind of like questioning his sanity. And so I think... And so he just kind of went through a normal 20 years or so. He just kind of went through that same period of time again. And then sometime around, I don't recall the exact year that he met with a race called the Blue Avians. I believe it was sometime around 2014 that he met this race, the Blue Avians, that were one of the 5 that make up this sphere being alliance, and that they helped him in getting over some of the kind of more traumatic aspects of the secret space program service that he had done, because some of it was very traumatic. He says in particular the things that he did in the last, I think it was 14 years of his service, that involved interrogation of people that may be kind of carriers for an artificial intelligence signal, or those that were deemed hostile or a security threat, that he was part of the interrogation, and that wasn't very pleasant, he says.
Michael, are you implying that they torture?
That was... He didn't use that word, but I guess that's a fair implication to draw, that people that were suspected of being involved in things that were a security threat to the secret space program. This is the program he worked with, which was called Salla Warden, that these people were interrogated, and yes, it created a lot of trauma for him. And so, yes, I would say that you're pretty accurate there with that kind of guess, Sasha.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I have another source that this correlates with what was required of him. He actually was an assassin. And, of course, that splits you and shatters your soul when you have to work on that level. And then you're, living a normal life and you have your wife and family. So it creates a schism in the individuals who try to integrate the two realities. So this is called SPHERE, S-P-H-E-R-E, Alliance. And the Blue Avians, A-V-I-A-N-S, is one of the, now, are they blue-skinned? Is that why they called Blue Avians?
The way he's described it is that they have kind of blue skin, but it's actually more feathers, that they're an actual avian species, like a bird-like species.
Oh, okay.
So kind of like, I think it would be imagine like the ancient Egyptian gods, Horus and so forth, that they are something like that, which of course then raises the very legitimate question, well, are these the same beings like Ra and Horus and so forth that the ancient Egyptians worshipped? And so that's a very interesting question in itself. I think Corey hasn't kind of like openly made that association, but he's said that that's very possible.
Great. And there are 5 species, and say that again. So they are supporting humanity in some way. Am I getting this correct?
Yes, there are 5 extraterrestrial species that make up this sphere being alliance, who have just recently come into our part of the galaxy. And they are described as 6th to 9th dimensional beings, so they're very highly evolved, and that they have come in here to this part of the galaxy, into our solar system in particular, to help us deal with incoming galactic energies that are going to basically lead to really profound changes in our part of the galaxy, and in particular on the Earth, as these more highly refined energies come in, that we are going to awaken to the truth of our galactic heritage and our histories, and so they are here to kind of like help us as we kind of like integrate these energies, and that they're trying to play a positive role, not so much in terms of directly intervening, but as in like ensuring that the extraterrestrial races that have been heavily involved in our world for centuries, both the positive and the negative, that they kind of like observe certain rules of the game in terms of allowing humanity to kind of awaken to the truth and to kind of like process it in its own way and manifest our own future, a new future, but it has to be kind of like with our own collective consciousness manifesting it.
What is the effect of coming into the center of the galactic core, the energies? How does that affect us?
Well, these are kind of, I guess, more refined cosmic energies that every galaxy has that radiate out from the galactic core. And these energies, Paul LaViolette talks about galactic superwaves, that they kind of like come in peaks and troughs. And Paul has said that we are due for a new galactic superwave to come through our region of the solar system, that they kind of come through every 12 to 14,000 years, something like that. And it's been that long since the last galactic superwave came in. So this kind of fits in pretty closely with the kind of information that Corey is revealing from the Blue Avians. And so we have this kind of more highly refined energy. I can't recall if Corey says it comes exclusively through the galactic center, or if it comes from higher dimensions, probably a combination of both. I think that's the way typically it operates. These higher energies come from, say, ninth dimension or ninth density, coming through the kind of galactic core of a galaxy, and then kind of radiating out through all the suns of that galaxy, which then in turn radiate that energy out to all of the planets and so forth. So probably something like that. But essentially it's like we are going to be very shortly, and probably are in the midst of these kind of galactic superwaves, or these more highly refined universal energies, cosmic energies, uplifting us and making it possible for us to manifest a new collective reality.
Mm-hmm. Is this what they call the ascension? What they typically refer to as the ascension?
Yeah, exactly, yes. Different people have talked about the ascension. And probably the one set of literature that kind of like, I think, more accurately describes what the Blue Avians and what the Sphere Being Alliance is doing is the Ra material. The Ra material, it basically talked about a 6th density social memory complex that was here to help prepare us for a kind of an ascension event or a harvest, a future harvest. The Ra material, they were a series of channelings that happened from 1981 to 1984. Don Elkins and Carla Ruckert, they were very much involved in that information. And basically that information described the way in which the galaxy and the whole universe go through the ascension process. And so what they described there is pretty much what I believe the Blue Avians are now saying is happening at this very moment. So this is the time for the ascension, and this is the time for us to kind of like get up to speed with as much information so that we can collectively manifest a new world or a new civilization that kind of like more closely fits with our aspirations.
So we will no longer be in third dimension. We'll be in a different vibratory frequency, or what will happen to the Earth and this current planet?
Well, definitely, yes. In the Ra material, they talked about the Earth also ascending up from third density to fourth density. And as a consequence, the Earth could only hold those beings that would rise up in consciousness to fourth density or higher. And so people who chose to live in that third density consciousness, they would kind of like collectively manifest for themselves disasters where they would basically die off and go to some other third density planet somewhere else that they can then continue their evolution and learn the lessons they need to learn, but that the Earth will rise to fourth density and eventually fifth density and so forth. And those beings that are kind of in harmony with the Earth and have chosen to evolve into fourth density and higher, they can choose to stay with the Earth and manifest a completely new social reality. So, like, we could manifest a utopia here.
Michael, in the link by Warden and others, they talk about the ones that are going to get harvested to go to the next level are ones that serve others instead of more than they serve themselves. Does your information include that kind of a slant?
Exactly, yes. That's the whole kind of service to other versus service to self kind of dichotomy. That in order, Ra material basically said that in order to ascend, in order to be able to make the transition to this fourth density Earth, people had to reach a minimum of a 51% service to other consciousness, which meant that, basically means that, just over half of your consciousness is focused more about helping others than just helping yourself. Of course, you could go much more over that, and many people do, but that our planet because at the time, 1981, I forget the exact figure, but it might have been something like it was 35% service to other and like 65% service to self. It was that kind of ratio. So to reach that 51% service to other meant that you had to do a lot of work. And as we know, it's not easy surviving in our world. You have to kind of like, work and get a job and do things that are all oriented about, looking after yourself and your security and so forth. And that's all part of of a civilization which is predominantly service to self. But that we had to rise beyond that and achieve that kind of 51% graduation level, if you like, so that we could then graduate or evolve with the earth, and then we can manifest a civilization which is much more service to other oriented.
So what's been going on up until this point? What's the time? Do they have a time frame when this will happen? And if so, what's the purpose of this, the alternative space programs and all the slavery that's going on?
Well, that's very interesting. Okay, so in 1981 to 1984, that was when the raw material was first released. And they gave a 30-year period for the ascension. They basically said, okay, this is a 30-year time frame, and it can happen any time. So, get ready for this. Now, so that was a 30-year time frame. So the 30 years was up in, if you count 1984 as, the 30 year beginning from then that means that the 30 years was up in 2014, which was basically around the time that Corey met with the Sphere Being Alliance beings, and that he was kind of helped and then gradually introduced into their program and asked to be a delegate for them to represent them in meetings with the various secret space programs that have been created both by our contemporary civilization and also earlier civilizations. And here we're talking about, say, ancient Atlanteans or ancient India or even Nazi Germany, that they all had their secret space programs. They all created their own secret breakaway civilizations. And so all of these different groups had to be part of the kind of meetings that the Sphere Alliance beings said that needed to occur so that agreement could be reached on how humanity would be allowed to basically make its own decisions with minimal interference by the different ET races, both positive and negative, so that humanity would make its own decisions and then manifest for itself the collective future it wants.
So you're talking about a collective future. It's not just a matter of individuals, and it has to be more than half of the populace that buys the. It's not just 3% to change the morphogenic field, but it's got to be more than half. Do I got you right?
Well, it has to be something that is collectively manifested. So, in other words, our civilization at the moment, you can look at, say, the last 100 years or so, that our civilization's culture has been conditioned pretty much by the mass media. And so what the mass media tells us, whether it's through the print media, the radio, television, is basically the collective consciousness that has been manifested. What is happening now for the first time is that we actually have an alternative media, like your television show is a good example. Also, your radio show is a good example. Now, you reach thousands of listeners. I don't know how many listeners you reach.
Exactly.
Millions. Okay, so
eventually we get to millions when we get out into our social networks and all the people that push it out there, plus our live listeners. So this is going to get out there en masse, and so anybody listening, we do encourage you to, spread it out there and pass this on. So go ahead, back to your train of thought. So,
right, so exactly.
We have alternative media.
Yes, so now the alternative media, such as your show, basically is now reached is now reaching millions of people who previously just relied on the mass media for their information. And so now what people are getting is a different narrative about the future. So they're not getting all the doom and gloom that comes through the mass media. They're getting messages of hope and ascension and the possibilities of a beautiful new creation in the world, such as what I believe your show does and what we're talking about now. So people are now receiving a new set of information, data about what the world can be like, what we have the power to collectively manifest. And I think this is what is becoming more and more a dominant part of the alternative media, is that people are becoming more empowered by the possibilities of collectively manifesting a world which is very different to the world of our grandparents or our parents, something that's much more in alignment with our kind of collective aspirations. And I believe that this is something that the Blue Sphere Being Alliance are trying to encourage, that they are getting people like Corey to reveal the truth about these secret space programs. And this truth is coming through the alternative media because, I'm speaking to you and to Sasha because, NBC and Fox News and CNN, they're not going to listen to this information. So this is not information they're not going to broadcast to their millions of listeners. So I talk to you and tell you about the information Corey is releasing, and this reaches millions of people. And so now people get to learn the truth about these secret space programs and get to learn about this intervention by this Sphere Being Alliance, who are wanting us to learn the truth so that we can collectively manifest a kind of fourth density or fifth density world that enables us to achieve our highest dreams.
Wow. What can we do about the people that are slaving in the mines and the people that are debt slaves on this planet?
Well, this is part of the process, because in order to change things, you need to have them disclosed. It's kind of like, the truth has to be revealed about all of these dark things that have been happening, which is why Corey says that the Blue Avians have been instructing him to tell all, reveal even the dark stuff that's been going on. Because if you shield people from this information, it means that at an unconscious level, they're not working through it. It's basically staying down there in the subconscious mind, and they're not working through it. But if you reveal that there's been these kind of galactic slave trade rings that have been occurring on planet Earth, and that there are these kind of like, elite human elites that have been acting as kind of like pimps for the galactic slave trade, that when you first hear that, it's, you go through the process of shock and anger and dismay and the whole kind of thing about that. But, it's part of the process of releasing the truth. And that, then we are going to collectively manifest a system for dealing with those types of atrocities, whether it's going to be kind of, war crime trials, crime against humanity, or whether it's going to be truth and reconciliation commissions. It's really up to us to decide how we deal with the disclosures that are going to be happening. Corey says that part of the process is that there's going to be these massive document dumps, that he's just the beginning. He is basically revealing the truth of these secret space programs. More and more whistleblowers will be coming forward to reveal more details. And then fairly soon you're going to start having document dumps. Organizations like WikiLeaks and others are going to start releasing these document dumps. And people are going to read about all of this. They're going to read about the secret corporations basically doing deals with different extraterrestrial races, trading advanced technologies for gold, or basically trading captive humans for gold or high technology, whatever it is. People are going to read these things in these document dumps that are going to be coming fairly soon. So Corey's just kind of like the gentle awakening, if you like, because once these documents start getting released through WikiLeaks or similar organizations, it's going to be kind of saturation media coverage, and people are going to be overwhelmed, frankly, because it's going to be so shocking. If you haven't done the preparation, if you haven't listened to this kind of level of information, and you've kind of dismissed it, when the truth is really revealed through these documents, it's like everyone that hasn't kind of like opened themselves up to this possibility, they're going to have to go through a really quick learning curve to get up to speed.
Wow. So who are the people, which species or individuals, what races are blocking this information? They have been obviously for, hundreds if not thousands of years. Who's blocking it? Have you identified like who's behind the Vatican, who's behind the throne of England, etc.?
Yes, he has identified the main ones. Basically, there's different levels here, but the main ones that have been kind of like enforcing things here is a group of reptilian extraterrestrials, the Draconians. A lot of people are familiar with them now through the work of David Icke and others like Alex Collier, who have talked about the Draconians and the reptilians. That the Draconians actually have a kind of royal group of, they're kind of like dragons, if you like. Alex Collier called them the Sakars. According to Corey, he just describes them as the royal white Draconians. They're kind of like 14 foot tall. They have wings and they're white. And these are incredibly powerful psychic beings whose mental abilities are really shocking, even for someone like Corey, who had been exposed to secret space programs and kind of like being involved in telepathic communications for a long time as part of his training. He says that when he did this kind of mental telepathy with one of these royal whites or these Sakars, he says it was just so shocking. It was almost like a mind rape. It was so powerful, these beings' psychic abilities. He said he had to recover from that. It took him a while to recover from that. So this is someone who's actually got a lot of experience with telepathic communications with different ET races. So he was kind of really kind of like put back by the kind of mental psychic abilities of these royal whites or these Sakars. But the Sakars themselves, according to Corey, are subservient to even more powerful beings. And this is where we kind of get into the whole kind of Luciferian, satanic kind of sixth density, sixth dimensional consciousness and artificial intelligence as well. That this is kind of like a universal or a cosmic force, a dark universal cosmic force, and that at the highest level of the kind of negative hierarchy, you have this kind of Luciferian, satanic, artificial intelligence nexus, which is in control, and that they kind of like basically get these kind of other beings, powerful beings like the Sakars or these royal white Draconians to kind of like do their dirty work.
Wow. So there's a hierarchy, and then we're way down on this totem pole. So where are the Anunnaki in this? Are the Anunnaki the Draconians? Are they a different race? Are they the Homo capensis? Do you have that figured out?
To be honest, I can't remember Corey talking at length about the Anunnaki. He does say that there is an alliance of positive human-like extraterrestrial races. He has said that he's gone to several of these meetings, and typically they have anywhere from 40 to 60 different extraterrestrial civilizations represented at these meetings. And here we're talking about the kind of usual positive extraterrestrials like the Pleiadians, the Sirians, the Andromedans, and so forth. Now, I would suspect that that's probably where you would find the Anunnaki represented. He says, and Corey says that of these 40 to 60 different extraterrestrial civilizations, human-looking civilizations that have an interest on Earth, 22 of them have a direct genetic connection with humanity, which is the same number that Alex Collier has come up with.
Right.
And I suspect that that's where you would actually have the Anunnaki as part of that.
Well, yeah, I would just like to add, I've been studying the Anunnaki for many, many years, is that they systematically, and what they told us, didn't want us to know about the other, although they were totally aware, they didn't want us to know about the other races. They wanted to pose as the only gods for humanity.
Yes, this is one of the things that Corey has said again and again, that there have been different extraterrestrial civilizations and also ancient human civilizations. Here we're talking about the Atlanteans or the Lemurians or the Hyperboreans or the Mayans, that these different ancient human civilizations, that they developed their own secret space programs, and that they have appeared in our era and basically pretended or acted as though that they were gods or advanced superior beings. That this is happening now with some of our ancient programs. And in our ancient history, some of the ET civilizations kind of like approached us exactly as you said, Sasha, with the Anunnaki and the Sumerians. If you read, and as you I'm sure have talked about many times, the Sumerian cuneiform texts, as Zechariah Sitchin has explained, extensively describes how the Sumerians regarded the Anunnaki as gods. And the Anunnaki were very comfortable with that they wanted to be treated or wanted to be viewed as gods because that's how they regarded themselves in relation to humanity.
So these other ancient cultures, the Anunnaki came here 450,000 years ago. Are they all connected together? Were they aware of each other? I'm talking about the breakaway civilizations in previous times. Were they aware of each other or were they isolated?
I believe that they were isolated. The way it's been described by Corey, it seems that these are we have these kind of highs and lows, and the different scriptures, ancient historical texts talk about, our history being a cyclic one, going through a golden age, and then a silver age, and a bronze age, and then an iron age, and then kind of up and down again and again. And that as we go through these ages, occasionally you have civilizations when they go through a kind of golden age of developing very advanced technologies and developing secret space programs. And when a civilization starts going down, it's going down that downward trajectory, Earth cataclysms and so forth, that the elite from those civilizations are able to sustain themselves either by developing breakaway civilizations with kind of bases in the Earth's interior, or they develop off-world bases on the Moon, Mars, or elsewhere in our solar system, or even in other parts of the galaxy. That this has happened again and again, and he's named a number of these civilizations: the Atlanteans, the Sumerians, the Vedic civilization, and the Mayans, all having developed their own secret space programs and developed off-world capabilities and establishing colonies in other civilizations. And in particular, he has spent a bit of time talking about the Mayan civilization, that the Mayans actually have been working closely with the Blue Avians, and that the Mayan civilization, the Mayan secret space program civilization, actually helped Corey together with the Blue Avians in getting through some of the traumatic memories he had of the secret space program when he was involved in these interrogation sessions. That the Mayans were involved in that, and that the Mayans also have established colonies in the Pleiades constellation, that millions of humans have been taken to the Pleiades to be part of these Mayan civilizations that have been established there. And Corey said that the Mayans have been actually playing a very positive role in rescuing people caught up in this galactic slave trade. That you have unscrupulous corporations or unscrupulous extraterrestrial beings that are abducting entire human communities and trading them in a galactic slave trade. but that the Mayans have been playing a role in the interception of these ships with these captive humans intended to be taken to some other world to be slaves, and liberates them and then takes them to the Pleiades to be part of these kind of Mayan space colonies where they're treated very well, and with the hope that one day Earth will be ready to receive these people back.
I think that almost everybody can see the lid of the sarcophagus of Lord Tikal, where it shows him inside the cockpit with all his technical devices. There it is in stone, a Mayan in a rocket ship.
Exactly. Thanks for bringing that up, Sasha. That's a good example of the Mayans having their own secret space program. The drawings, the glyphs of Pakal showing those advanced vehicles. So yes, the Mayans had their own program, and it exists to this very day, and it's actually playing a very positive role. I actually had a very interesting experience myself back in 2010 when I traveled to Mexico City for a major international UFO Congress, and I met an extraterrestrial contactee, and he surprised me at the time because he said that he was working with this Mayan extraterrestrial civilization, and I kind of like really had trouble fathoming what he was talking about in terms of an extraterrestrial civilization that used the Mayan language, because I was thinking, oh, okay, the Sumerian.
Hold that thought. We'll get back to that story when we get back from our break. Thanks very much. Back a few.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And before we get back to our very special show with Dr. Michael Salla, and I'm your host, Janet Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson. Before we go back to the show, please do go over to our donation button on freedomslips.com and donate what you can, $1, $5, $15, $20, whatever you can donate is greatly appreciated, and we do thank you very much for your donation. So welcome back, Sasha and Michael. Michael, where we left off is you were talking about Mexico City. You met an ET contactee who was talking about the Mayan civilization program.
That's right, yes. So I'm there in Mexico City, and I meet a contactee, a Mexican contactee, and he's telling me about this extraterrestrial civilization that communicates in the Mayan language, and that they have a space fleet, and they have kind of colonies on other worlds and parts of this other different solar systems and so forth. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I've never heard of this before, and all I've ever heard of was the kind of like the Anunnaki and Nibiru, and then come across some of the Vedic literature about ancient beings from Sirius and so forth that came and colonized and so forth. So I'd never heard of a kind of Mayan extraterrestrial civilization. And so I just kind of like put it in my memory banks and forgot about it. And then earlier this year, when I began asking Corey some questions and getting his answers in a series of email questions and answers, he talked at length about this Mayan civilization. and basically described how they were a breakaway civilization that emerged out of the Mayan culture and established colonies in other worlds, and had established these colonies in the Pleiades star system. And so that was kind of a real eye-opener for me, because no one else had ever talked about a Mayan secret space program. I had that experience in Mexico City, and no one else had ever talked about it, so I never talked about it publicly. I figured that this was one of those personal experiences that, well, if it's real, eventually I'll receive confirmation from someone else. And so I'd received confirmation from Corey that, yes, there was a Mayan secret space program, that they were the descendants of the ancient Mayan culture, and that they had been able to establish not only kind of bases and a presence in the Earth's interior, presumably South America, the Andes and so forth, but also in other solar systems.
Wow. What I was struck by, what you say before the break, is that we have all these breakaway civilizations, and it doesn't matter which culture they appear to be isolated and unrelated, they still look down on a part of their population. They had hierarchy. They still saw themselves that they were superior, and that they couldn't reveal this to the average person. And that I feel sad about that. I hope that eventually we get to the level where we're all included into a Star Trekian type of reality, where every person has the potential to go to the academy and explore the stars. Have you encountered any stories of any civilizations that are truly like original Roddenberry Star Trekian potential society?
Well, it's very interesting. What you said is very important, that the earlier breakaway civilizations, that they were all the elites of that society. So whether we're talking about the Atlanteans or the Lemurians or the Mayans or the Hyperboreans, whoever, that the ones that established the secret space programs and got to escape the cataclysms were the elite, and that the common persons were denied this level of information. And I think this is why what is happening now with the Sphere Being Alliance, the information Corey is releasing, is so important and connects with the Ra material, is that our planet, for the first time, collectively has the opportunity to ascend. That previously it had been these kind of like breakaway societies that had achieved a kind of certain technological or spiritual high, and that they were able to develop space programs where they were able to save their elites. That our society collectively has chosen another route, because as you know, many people have made clear, Edgar Cayce, Gordon Michael Scullion, and Nostradamus and so forth, there were many predictions that we would have planetary cataclysms, and we would have gone the same way, where we would have had an elite with this kind of advanced information escaping the cataclysms, establishing their own breakaway civilization. But that didn't happen, and I believe it didn't happen because collectively we were able to evolve enough that we were at a collective level able to open up our hearts enough to establish compassion and empathy with others sufficiently so that these cataclysms at a global level didn't happen. And I think what is happening now is that as a planetary culture, we are coming together closer and closer, that the empathic connections between all humanity is becoming stronger and stronger. So I think it's going to be something along the lines of what you were kind of saying there, Janet, that collectively now we are at the verge of evolving in a kind of Star Trek-like way, where our entire planet now is exposed to the truth of extraterrestrial civilizations and advanced technologies, and so that now our whole planet can embrace this, and we can move into a kind of Star Trek future rather than repeat the kind of cataclysmic elite escapes of the past civilizations.
Do you know why the Blue Avians and the other 4 races decided to come at this time? Did they come in response to something?
I think it had to do with the kind of timetable that the Ra material described back in 1981-84, that they described a 30-year window, and at the end of that window, that's when the ascension would happen, that the harvesting would happen, that collectively humanity would have to make a decision. So I think that the Blue Avians, they started appearing, I think in that kind of like 2012, 2014 period, which was the end of that 30-year cycle. And so I think what happened in 2012, the whole kind of Jose Gales and the whole 2012 cosmic alignment, that something significant did happen. And I think maybe what we did collectively was we bought our society more time, that rather than being wiped out in some kind of global catastrophe, that enough of us opened up to the galactic center or to these high dimensional consciousnesses or energies, so that we bought ourselves a little more time so that we can now move forward. And so now there seems to be a new period, a new time window in which we can kind of manifest this. One of the periods David Wilcock has mentioned is 2017. That he says is the real window, that by 2017, this is when we are going to make this transition into a Star Trek-like society. But of course, the Blue Avians are saying that it's really up to us. All the Blue Avians are doing is making sure that the bad guys don't get to move forward with their kind of cataclysmic plans, that they're kind of frozen, and the good guys that have been kind of like fighting the bad guys, that they're here as well with us and trying to help us get through this window that we have. But that basically the Blue Avians are helping Corey or exposing Corey to a lot of these meetings and the information that he's been disclosing in interviews and reports that he's been giving, that he is basically letting the rest of us know that we have like a 2-3 year time frame or window in which this information can be released, so that we can collectively manifest a future that would be something like Star Trek. Now, what happens in 2017 and after that, I'm not quite sure. I think Corey's been kind of emphasizing that it truly is up to us, that he's not making predictions, he's not giving any timelines. It's really up to us to manifest things, that the Blue Avians are really here. The best way to describe it is like they're kind of like a galactic umpire, if you like. You have the good side, the light side, the service to other side, and then you have the dark side, the service to self, the negative polarity side, and that they've been kind of like fighting each other in terms of trying to influence the Earth to go one way or the other for decades or centuries. And that the Blue Avians or the Sphere Being Alliance have come along, and they're kind of like a galactic umpire. They come along and said, okay, now's the time, it's like, we're entering the final 5 minutes now, these are the rules, this is what you're supposed to do, and they're here to kind of like oversee the final 5 minutes of the game.
Wow. So let's look at the game as it is right now. Do you have a question, Sasha? It's your turn, I guess.
No, well, I just wonder if Corey's in danger because he's laughing on him.
Well, he is under a certain degree of protection from the Blue Avians, but from what he's said very recently, that protection is not 100%. There have been some incidents. I mean, he was warned in June. He went to a meeting that was around June 11, I recall, and this was with the Committee of 200 and other elites in a kind of location, an old church in Europe, and he went as a delegate for the Sphere Being Alliance, and he was directly threatened. His family was threatened at this meeting. Basically, the beings, the Committee of 200 actually, basically, they made an offer. It was an offer that was along the lines of, look, you're releasing a lot of information. We want you to stop releasing that information. And by November of 2015, we will do our own limited disclosure where we will tell people enough of the truth so that they can adjust to an extraterrestrial reality. But we won't tell them so much so that there'll be war crime trials and people will be arrested and so forth. They basically said, we're going to tell them only a limited amount, and we want to basically ensure that there'll be a 50-year kind of amnesty on those people involved in the worst aspects of the running of the secret space programs. So Corey said no to that, or certainly he was not in support of that. And but he was threatened, and what has happened recently, he believes is associated with those threats. And the threats involve his family. He's got 2 young children, and there have been things that have happened with his children that are directly related to those threats. And he is not very happy with that. His wife is very disturbed over that. And it just shows that someone like Corey, as protected as he is, that the elite, those that are working on the dark side, that they still have their ways of being able to intimidate and pressure people, and so there is a lot of concern, and frankly, people do need to pray for Corey's protection and the protection of his family, because he's taken a great risk upon himself in revealing the truth. I mean, there are other whistleblowers who reveal a lot of really important information, but never to the extent and the depth of what Corey Goode has revealed. And so he truly is under threat. And everyone, pray for him and just envisage angel wings or white light or whatever it is, whatever positive way you want to manifest protection for Corey and his family. Yeah, it's important to do that.
I wonder if there's some way to reach those beings that are in the dark side of the continuum. Maybe, do we have a story of the nature of existence itself, and how we got to this point in the game, which is going on for trillions of years or even more? From my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that everything originated from one source, and the oneness from the light, so to speak, and so the polarity was created for the continuum, like divine play, Leela, for us to diversify and co-create with existence. And so maybe there's some way to reach those beings that are so-called dark, because they too are ultimately of the light. Do you have any thoughts, either of you, on that concept?
Okay. As far as I recall Corey talking about that, it kind of comes back to this kind of Luciferian artificial intelligence consciousness that exists. Maybe according to the Ra material, you can actually have a negative polarity in the 5th density. So I think that this would be something along those lines, a very powerful kind of Luciferian, satanic 5th density force that is still very active in our universe, in our galaxy, and is able to manipulate and fool other powerful beings into doing its dictates. And so you have these draconian beings, the royal whites or the Sakars, doing the bidding of this kind of Luciferian artificial intelligence type energy. And these beings themselves are being fooled and tricked into kind of like doing the bidding of this kind of 5th dimensional negative polarity force. And so, so there you have like the hierarchy. So these kind of like a draconian royal elite, then they kind of like impose a very draconian, very repressive social structure on draconian worlds, which then go out and conquer human worlds, who then basically impose similar draconian structures, and so on it goes down in terms of a pyramid structure. But at its apex, you have this kind of Luciferian 5th dimensional force that Corey says, or that the Blue Avians have identified as really being at the kind of apex of this negative hierarchy in our universe, and that everyone kind of underneath that kind of apex they themselves are manipulated at a certain level. So it's like the like in the Nazi death camps. You had Jews that became the guards and of other Jews that were targeted for extermination, and you had kind of Nazis at different levels being the camp overseers or prison guards, and everyone at that different level, they themselves are a victim at some level, even though they may have been prison guards or may have been the exterminators. They themselves at some level are a victim, and so I think that the key message that the Blue Avians carry is that yes, there are those that have committed atrocities, but let's never forget that they themselves at a certain level are victims as well and deserve compassion as well. So it's like we need to have a degree of compassion as we balance that with the need for justice.
Yeah, justice doesn't have to mean punishment. It can mean just protecting society from these people's dangerous impulses.
Yeah, that's very good, Sasha. It's very important. We live with the kind of punitive justice model in the West, in the United States, but really a lot of traditional societies live with a restorative justice model. And the difference is that in the punitive justice model is that when a crime is committed, it's like you've broken the law of the state, and the state punishes you, and basically it's like it's almost like you've offended against the state. Whereas in a restorative justice system, as in, we all live in Hawaii, we know Ho'oponopono, how that operates, that when there has been a crime or an injustice that's been committed, the person who's committed the crime, that they have to restore or do justice to the person who was the victim of the crime, and restore them or help them deal with the effect of that crime. And so that's a very different thing. And so I think as we come to as we realize the truth of what has been going on for decades or centuries in our world with these secret space programs and the injustices that have occurred, that we will benefit a lot from learning about these restorative justice models that the kind of indigenous peoples of different societies have.
And I think that's what they were asking Corey on some level to perhaps facilitate or participate in some kind of truth and reconciliation and amnesty for 50 years. I kind of missed what you said there, but there might be some way of reaching at least the vast majority of those people who are in the dark side, and kind of like the Darth Vader got recruited into the light side of the Force. Perhaps we can awaken the light side of the consciousness within the vast majority of those people or beings, and somehow get into the amnesty and truth and reconciliation. That's what I'm hoping for, something on that level.
Right, Janet. Well, that's a really tough question, actually. It's not easy to answer because this was something that arose at that June meeting that Corey attended in Europe, where the Committee of 200 and other elites basically made this limited disclosure offer, and they were concerned about kind of like vengeance trials, Nuremberg-style trials, where it's just kind of like victor's justice, where the elite that were behind these crimes are kind of like exposed and basically tried. So they were looking for a kind of amnesty or some kind of non-prosecution for 50 years, and that's something that we as a collective are going to have to deal with, because if we go down this punitive justice route, they're going to fight to the last man, because they've got powerful resources and they're going to fight to the very end. But if we go for, say, a more restorative justice model and be prepared to follow societies like South Africa or like Argentina, who dealt with repressive regimes, and then they decided at the end that what mattered most was not punishment of people that were responsible for crimes, but truth and healing of the victims of those crimes. That the things that the victims most wanted was the truth. They wanted to know what really happened, and they wanted healing. They wanted help in healing. So that's all about restorative justice. And so I agree with you, Janet, that, the more we can go down that track of restorative justice in dealing with the wrongs that have been committed through these secret space programs, the more I think that the elites are going to be prepared to work with us rather than fight against us as we go down this track. So yes, I think it's important that we go down restorative justice and be prepared to give amnesty to even the most the people who committed the most terrible things, because in a way what the Blue Avians are telling us and what the Ra material is telling us is that all are victims, even those that committed the crimes are victims. Certainly, I think that at the highest level, there probably will have to be people called to account, but when we're talking about the vast majority of those on the dark side that did these things, that we may be a lot better off going for that restorative justice model.
Yeah, I would like to say, Gandhi said that the idea of, vengeance or an eye for an eye will leave the entire world blind. But there's also the matter of disputes between groups of people. That's what we see going on. That has been, of course, fostered by those that would divide and conquer us. But I like the Zuni way in ORIB when there was enough room on top of the mesa, and half the people had to go. The two moieties, or halves of the village, had a tug of war. And then the losers were given help and physical help and material goods to start another mesa settlement. And so there are peaceful ways of settling disputes, too.
I have a question. Is there a being or a group of beings that are perhaps totally unreachable, that have no ability for compassion or empathy at all, or no, they lack the intelligence to have a conversation with them and to even offer truth and reconciliation? Is that what's happening in the fifth convention or whatever level that these Luciferian beings exist?
Right. Okay. That's a very interesting question. Corey says that he attended 4 meetings that occurred in June as a delegate for the Sphere Being Alliance, where they discussed these various offers and the full disclosure event that is being planned and prepared for. And then he said that more recently there were another 2 meetings and that he didn't go, but there was a delegate from the Solar Warden space program who is part of the what's called the Secret Space Program Alliance, which is an alliance of kind of more positive space programs along the lines of what I was discussing earlier, like the Mayan civilization and so forth, and some indigenous Earth civilizations. So this Colonel Gonzalez went to these 2 other meetings, and that he basically went to a meeting involving the Royal White Draconians, and they were not willing to compromise. They were basically saying, along with representatives from the Committee of 200, some of the more senior representatives, that these people were not willing to compromise because I guess they were responding to the reaction or the fallout from that June 11 meeting that Corey had attended with the Committee of 200, where basically an offer was made and that offer was rejected. And so basically the Committee of 200 and the beings at that kind of higher density level that they're working with, the Royal White Draconians, they realized that there is not going to be any compromise on the side of the Secret Space Program Alliance in terms of accommodating their their request or their desire for limited disclosure and a kind of 50-year amnesty, and so that they're going to play hardball and they're going to go ahead with false flag operations and a lot of kind of dark things, and of course Corey's family has been threatened, and that they are not, they're basically going to go down fighting. So that seems to be a group that is not at all going to negotiate. And this is one of the things that Corey says is part of the way the artificial intelligence operates at a deeper level, that this is a force that knows no compromise. It's incapable of compromise. It's kind of like, he describes it as a kind of like an artificial intelligence signal, or as it's kind of like an electronic signal, if you like, that exists in some kind of plasma vortex somewhere out there. Whether we describe it as Luciferian or satanic or something separate to that. But the thing was that Corey says that this is a signal, an electronic signal that kind of like infiltrates worlds and infiltrates biological systems that develop electronics, and it infiltrates them to develop more powerful, more evolved electronic systems that eventually become artificial intelligence. And once that happens, this artificial intelligence signal is able to infiltrate and take over those worlds that have developed artificial intelligence, and eventually they kind of like imprison the creators of that artificial intelligence and manipulate them for whatever purpose they want, and eventually they exterminate them. And this has happened again world after world. The whole kind of plot in Battlestar Galactica, the 2004 version, Corey says that has happened in world after world. That is, there's more science than fact in that science fiction series. And sorry, it's more science than fiction in that science fiction series.
Well, I think that's how they put the information out to us in science fiction. And that's part of the information and disinformation at the same time. People will say, oh, that's just science fiction. But that's actually the reality underneath our nose. And we need to pay attention to that. What's in the Blue Avians? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, because what you said is just very important, because it's right under our nose and they hide it out there. Because what happened with this whole kind of Battlestar Galactica scenario, and people don't know this, is that the cast and crew of Battlestar Galactica were invited to the United Nations in New York City to give a presentation on galactic diplomacy. They were basically asked questions about how this show covered the issues between these synthetic beings, or these synthetic artificial intelligence beings, the Cylons, with the humans that they were involved with. So that the United Nations actually had the cast and crew come there and give a presentation of how they were kind of like trying to encourage dialogue and reach an accommodation between these two warring factions. So if that isn't more in your face than anything else, I don't know what is.
Well, if you watch Caprica, the follow-up, or it was supposed to be a prequel or whatever, but Zoe, who ended up being a Borg, being put into a robot, eventually reached consciousness and realized that she was all there is, was, and ever will be. She became enlightened. So perhaps there is some way that even these artificial intelligence beings can become enlightened, and that's what I'm looking at. How can we help them? Because they too are of the light. There's a part of them that is from source. They want to go. It's like salmon. They want to return to source, to enlightenment, but what they fear is what they want as well. So part of them are resisting this evolution of their own consciousness by supporting, this Luciferian agenda. I have another question. So the Blue Avians and those other beings of the 9th and 6th to 9th level, are they able to help us in other ways than what they're doing already, or Do they have a non-interference clause and they've got to let us do it ourselves? Or are they going to let all the beings of lower level densities get wiped out by this artificial intelligence? I mean, certainly, we got to look at it at that level. What's going on with that game?
Right, yes. The Sphere Being Alliance have been playing a very non-interventionist role. They basically kind of come in, as I said earlier, as kind of like a galactic umpire, because we've had various extraterrestrial races intervening on our world, both positive and dark, doing all sorts of things, whether to help us or to kind of like bring about global catastrophe. We've had extraterrestrials intervening and doing that for decades now. But the Sphere Being Alliance, that they are operating, it's according to what Corey has revealed so far, they've done a number of things. One, that they've kind of implemented a solar system-wide quarantine, which prevents the kind of more negative extraterrestrial races getting the kind of financial resources that they were getting before in terms of a galactic slave trade or trading advanced armaments, with other solar systems and so forth. So that the kind of the quarantine has put an end to the kind of commerce and the slave trade. So that's hit the dark side much more than the positive side. That also that the Blue Avians have helped the positive side. And here we're talking about the Secret Space Program Alliance that Corey is working with, kind of like supporting or coordinating with them. That they have been helped in terms of getting their hands on more advanced technologies so that they can now implement a planetary quarantine, because previously the quarantine around the planet was very porous because there were civilizations with some of the kind of darker forces that had, say, more advanced travel portal technologies that could kind of come in and out and do all sorts of dark things. But now the Solar Warden program has more advanced technologies that they can use to implement a positive, or to kind of like neutralize the more advanced technologies of the dark side, because previously the dark side had more advanced technologies, which is why they were able to get away with a lot of things. But now the Blue Avians have kind of helped the positive side get more advanced technologies to neutralize. So they've kind of like leveled the playing field, if you like. But probably their biggest contribution has been in making Corey their delegate for these secret space programs, because now we're getting information from Corey about these secret space program alliance meetings and releasing this information to the world. Because if it wasn't for Corey being a delegate for the Sphere Alliance, we simply wouldn't know what was happening. What would be happening would be all going on behind the scenes. The different elites involved would be making their deals, and they would come up with some solution that would be meeting all of their interests, but would be excluding the interests of the common man. So what this Sphere Being Alliance has done by introducing Corey as their delegate is that they've ensured that the common person is being informed about these meetings, and that the information is getting out there, and that has kind of like brought in another factor, because it means that this is something that the different actors involved, or the different players involved in these negotiations behind the scenes, the positive factions and the negative factions, they have to take into consideration now that Corey is revealing the truth to the world. And so now they have to say, well, we have to come up with an agreement that takes into account that the world knows about us, that we just can't, trick people, with some other limited disclosure program, that they know the truth. So, we have to reveal the truth as well. And so that has been probably, I think, the most meaningful contribution that the Sphere Being Alliance has played in all of this, because by introducing Corey as their delegate into all of these meetings and protecting him as he reports back to the rest of us, his he's let the truth out to the world, and once Pandora's box is open, it can't be closed. And Corey's opened up Pandora's box, and more and more people are accepting what he's saying as the truth. They can feel it deep in their bones. People feel it.
Mm-hmm. Has Corey ever addressed the purpose of death? I mean, we're a species that apparently goes between third or fourth dimension. What is the purpose of death, and will that be eliminated?
That is something that he might cover in his. He's got an FAQ page on his website, the spherebeingalliance.com. If you go to my website, exopolitics.org, you'll see a big graphic there with basically Corey Goode interviews. And if you click that, you have a resource page with links to all the articles and the interviews and the websites associated with Corey's information. So there you can get a lot more information about Corey, and there on his frequently asked questions page, I know he's dealt with some questions along those lines, but not at great length, because he says he's not really someone that has done a lot of metaphysical work in the past. He's someone that was trained as an intuitive empath to work with the secret space programs, and he was a kind of and in his normal profession, he was a kind of information technology specialist, and so metaphysics is not his bag, and so he hasn't really gone deep into that. So I just
wondered, because they regressed him in age, so apparently they want to have him in his body as long as possible, because he's a very valuable person to keep embodied, right? So they must have some control over the life-death process if they have these technologies to keep someone like Corey alive. So that's the reason I was addressing that. We can let that go. We'll research that later, maybe write an article or something on it, or talk to Corey somewhere down in the line. We have about, it's 40 till about 15 minutes, 17, 18 minutes. I wanted to kind of outline the secret space program. We didn't really go into what is its structure. Can you kind of tell everybody what is going on with this space program?
Well, Corey says that there are essentially 5 different space programs that have been created in our civilization. The first one is the Solar Warden program, and that was developed by the military-industrial complex by the United States in the 1950s. President Eisenhower and the whole kind of like reverse engineering of captured extraterrestrial craft and meetings with secret extraterrestrial groups and so forth. So that's the Solar Warden program. Then he says the second most significant program is he calls it the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate, which is basically a consortium of major international corporations such as Lockheed Martin, Boeing Aerospace, Northrop Grumman, BAE, a whole, AEG, a whole, big consortium of major aerospace companies that were the corporate contractors for the building of the spacecraft that the Solar Warden commissioned. This was the way in which the U.S. military-industrial complex operates, that the military puts in orders for, say, a secret spacecraft, like the spacecraft carrier that can carry like 30 smaller spacecraft on it as fighters, kind of like an aircraft carrier based in space. So what the Solar Warden program would do, because the Navy, the Army, the Air Force didn't have expertise in doing that, they would contract out the building of these spacecraft to corporations, companies like Northrop Grumman, which builds aircraft carriers, or Lockheed Martin, which builds advanced spacecraft, aircraft. They contract out the building of these advanced spacecraft carriers and associated spacecraft to these companies. So these companies would build them for the Solar Warden space program. But these companies would also build their own that over the decades became a separate space program to the Solar Warden. And because these companies were the ones building these advanced technologies, the companies' space programs in time became more advanced than the Solar Warden program. So basically, this interplanetary corporate conglomerate over the decades, after it began building the first spacecraft for the Solar Warden, became more powerful, more evolved than the Solar Warden program. And this interplanetary corporate conglomerate is basically was infiltrated by the Nazi elite, because this is where we get the third program, which is described as the Dark Fleet by Corey. The third program that evolved out of Nazi Germany, that evolved out of the 1930s and the 1940s, when the Vril Society, the Thule Society, and the Black Sun Society all began to develop their own spacecraft after they were able to communicate with the Aldebrands. And this might be where there's a connection with the Anunnaki, Sasha, that the Vril Society had that connection with them. And so they built these, the first space program was built by Nazi Germany. The Vril Society, there were two space programs in Nazi Germany. No one's ever really talked about this to this kind of detail as far as I know. But basically you had the Vril Society with its own separate space program. And then you had the Nazi SS that was working with the Black Sun Society that developed its own separate program, but that was a program that was devoted towards the war effort. And of course, at the end of the war, when they came in and they took out the Nazi scientists and Project Paperclip, they took out the kind of technologies that were associated with the Nazi SS facilities in Prague, that were run by Hans Kammler, and they kind of took all that over to the United States. The Russians did the same, but these were the weaponized space program projects that the Nazis were developing, but they weren't the most evolved or the most advanced programs. The most advanced programs were the ones that were developed by the Vril Society. These were allowed to develop independently of the Nazi SS space programs, and those Vril Society programs, they established the first bases on the moon. That was in the kind of early 1940s, and then they established bases on Mars. Corey talks about this in his interviews. This is the most detailed exposition of the Nazi space program that has ever been revealed, and that's part of Corey's revelations. And so this is where you get the development of the Dark Fleet. And the Dark Fleet has its genesis in the Vril Society's secret space program and the infiltration of the Nazi element in the kind of the corporate space program that was developed by the military-industrial complex. So that's the third program, the Dark Fleet. That's basically an offshoot of this secret Nazi space program that was initially developed by the Vril Society, but then taken over by the Nazi SS and the Black Sun Society. And then there's a fourth program, and that's the one which kind of brings me back to how I started this show, which is I can't remember the exact term Corey used for it, but he refers to it as a kind of NATO-type alliance which operates outside of our solar system. It's basically run by Europeans. It is kind of like, as I said earlier, a kind of like a hand-me-down of space technologies to the Europeans that were kind of like feeling that they were cut out of these earlier space programs that I described before, the Solar Warden program, Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate, or the Dark Fleet. The major European powers, France, Germany, Italy, they felt cut out of this, and the Russians as well, that they felt cut out of the Solar Warden. So they wanted their own space program, so they were allowed to get advanced spacecraft from the interplanetary corporate conglomerate and said, here you have your space programs, and the Solar Warden people said to them, but you can only operate outside of our solar system. That way we're not going to have any, that way we're not going to have any conflict with you guys. So the French, the Germans, the Italians, and so forth have their own secret space program. It's this kind of interplanetary, I don't remember the exact name, but it's this NATO-like alliance that operates outside of our solar system. And this is why the Greek vote was so important, because the Europeans were funding their secret space program by these black budgets that they were siphoning lots of money from the different European economies, and basically a result of that was basically European living standards were being eroded, that the Europeans were becoming like Americans, where basically they're being squeezed by the military-industrial complex, which sucks out or siphons out all of the excess capital into the secret space programs. In the United States, this has been going on for decades now, and people have been, we're witnessing the collapse of the middle class in the United States. But now this is happening in Europe, and the Europeans, because, they have a little more guts or more balls, whatever you want to rephrase it, the Europeans are standing up to this. And the Greeks, and I think it's really great that the Greeks of everyone is giving the finger to the kind of central bankers who are in league with the kind of corporations that are funding and supporting the creation of this secret European space program. The Greeks are giving the finger to that and basically saying no to your austerity and no to your kind of like efforts to create a European slave race that basically does what you command it to do. No, we want freedom. We're not going to play along. And I think that it's great that the Greeks are doing this, because I think the Italians and the Spanish are going to follow soon afterwards. And I think that the end result, and I've written an article on this, and it'll come out tomorrow morning, that I think that the Greeks saying no to this austerity measures that the IMF and that the European Central Bank and the major funders like Germany have been trying to force Greece to accept, that the Greeks saying no to that, basically the inevitable result of the Greeks doing that is that it's going to lead to the disclosure of the European secret space program, because once the Greeks do it, the Spanish and the French are going to do it, and then the Europeans know that the game is up, that they cannot fund their secret space program secretly anymore. They're going to have to release the truth about it, because it's only by being truthful with the European population that the Europeans will say, okay, we think it's good, funding this secret European space fleet operating in the Pleiades solar system or something. That's a great idea, and we want to be a part of it. And I think that will probably be part of the transition into a kind of Star Trek-like galactic or planetary civilization.
What's the main purpose of the?
There's a fifth one. There's a fifth one. That's 4, right?
Oh, the fifth one.
Yes, the fifth
4 or
one.
5.
5.
Okay.
Basically, Corey describes that as kind of smaller kind of national corporate entities with their own programs. Nothing really major, something like the Russians have their own program, or the Chinese have their own program, or other companies or corporations or entities that are kind of outside of the main 4 that I've described, that they have their own separate thing running. But those are the main 4, and Corey describes the 5th one as kind of like a grab all of all of these other ones that are left out that are doing their own thing.
So what's the main purpose of all this space? Are they going for mining? Are they doing making money? Why spend all the money to do this? What's the purpose of these space programs that everybody's putting so much money into it and taking away from their people, as happens in Greece?
Well, every space program has its own agenda. So as I said, the Solar Warden has its agenda driven by the kind of U.S. military ethics that gave birth to it. So basically in the United States, you have a very strong military tradition in the United States Navy and the Army going back to the founding of the Republic, and especially the Navy. So the Navy kind of like takes it very seriously, that the kind of military culture that they have, which is to preserve and protect the Union and to swear an oath of loyalty to the Constitution, is very important to these guys. So at the bottom line, the Solar Warden is all about kind of like protecting the solar system. The interplanetary corporate conglomerate, their goal is the profit margin. It's like, how much money can we make by mining this planet or this asteroid, or by selling this group of people to this person or that group. So their agenda is profit. The Dark Fleet, their agenda, it's all about psychic power. It's all about developing higher consciousness, going back to the Vril Society, because those guys, these guys they kind of came out of a kind of dark, mystical, occult tradition. So for them, it was all about being able to get in touch with the black sun or the vortex energies or the energies of the galactic core and manifest that so that you can become a powerful psychic warrior. So for them, it's developing psychic energies and going around and developing that. For the European secret space program, I think for them it's probably something along the lines, the closest of all the programs I've identified, it's closest to the Star Trek culture. It's a model of exploration. It's like, okay, we represent the best of our world, we want to meet you and so forth. And as for the fifth grouping, as I said, it's a kind of grab bag, catch-all of different programs and nations and corporations that aren't quite up to the major leagues but have their own thing going.
Awesome. Thanks. Sash, you have a question?
Oh, well, just to be specific, how does Mr. Putin fit into this?
Well, Putin is part of this more positive secret space program alliance. He's trying to get the truth out there. Putin is involved in a deep way in terms of some of the more positive efforts that are out there. As far as the Russians' involvement in the secret space program, obviously they're involved in that European space program, also involved to a limited extent in the Solar Warden program. And I'm not sure about the interplanetary corporate conglomerate and the Dark Fleet. I don't think the Russians have played as much of a role in that. But certainly the Russians are trying to help prepare humanity for the truth, because Putin is definitely, probably, of all of the political leaders, aside from maybe Angela Merkel, but I think Putin would know more than Merkel. I think Putin would probably be the most knowledgeable world politician about these secret space programs.
Wow. And what's the role of our president? Which is the last one that was kind of good, and which one, who knows, and what was there? Like Kennedy, was he a good guy trying to reveal it to humanity, or who's on the dark side, who's on the light side?
Well, Kennedy definitely was on the right side. I mean, basically there was a power struggle, as I mentioned. You had the Solar Warden program that was developed in the 50s, and then in the 1960s you had this interplanetary corporate conglomerate that was working very closely with a group called the Majestic 12 organization that was working closely with the CIA. And Kennedy basically wanted to ensure that the secret space programs were run in accordance with the kind of more constitutional processes that he believed ought to apply to the entire U.S. government apparatus. And Kennedy basically got involved in a power struggle to try and get the Majestic 12 group and these corporations to play ball and release the truth about what was really going on. And unfortunately, as we know, Kennedy and the positive faction that he was associated with, the Navy, I believe that the U.S. Navy has been playing a very kind of more positive role behind the scenes in and releasing the truth about all of this, that they lost. And of course, we know what happened as a result of Kennedy's assassination.
We're running out of time. I want to make sure you get to tell everybody how to reach you. We're out of time.
Sure. exopolitics.org.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Wow, that went fast. Sorry, I lost track of time. Thanks.
Make aloha.
Salla. My love and blessings. Aloha.
Thank you. Aloha.